Good afternoon, and welcome to another broadcast of Fire, Black Press USA's live stream broadcast. Today, we're going to talk about a very intriguing race for the U.S. Senate out of South Carolina. Republicans are entering the election on November 3rd, holding a narrow 3-seat majority in the Senate. Democrats need a net gain of 4 seats to win a majority in the Senate, but can take control by picking up 3 seats if former Vice President Joe Biden wins the presidency, since the vice president breaks ties in the chamber. Up to 35 seats up for grabs in November. 23 are held by Republicans and 12 by Democrats. Republicans are also defending 5 seats that are rated tilt Republican or lean Republican, including the unexpected competitive race between Senator Lindsey Graham and our guest Jaime Harrison in South Carolina, which inside elections have now moved in the Democrats' favor this week. In the wake of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg's death and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell's commitment to give President Trump's nominee a vote, there's even more attention on Lindsey Graham, who is the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee. The nonpartisan political newsletter Inside Elections just shifted South Carolina's Senate race one step further from the solidly Republican category to likely to lean Republican. Today, Jaime Harrison, the former state Democratic Party chairman, is outraising and outspending Lindsey Graham. Who would have thought? And he's also getting national attention. He's tied currently with Lindsey Graham at 48% among likely voters in a Quinnipiac University poll. So the fight over Justice Ginsburg's replacement is really taking shape in more ways than one, including here in the Senate. Welcome, Jaime Harrison, to talk about your rise against Lindsey Graham.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's good to be on.
It's good to be. So listen, tell us this race, usually Lindsey Graham is extremely powerful. He's similar to in a lot of ways, Mitch McConnell out in Kentucky, but you are proving that no one is untouchable. Tell us about this experience of going up against Lindsey Graham.
Yeah, well, thank you again. Listen, I've always told folks this. When I first got into this race, there were a lot of people who said that, I didn't have a shot. I didn't have a chance. Even friends, tapped me on the shoulder and said, Jaime, we're happy, we're proud of you, but you're probably not going to win this. But folks just don't, I think those folks don't get to really know who I am. I was born into long odds. My mom was 16 years old when she had me. I was raised by my grandparents who had a 4th grade and an 8th grade education. But I was the first in my family to go to college, went to Yale, went to Georgetown Law, worked on Capitol Hill, was one of the top staffers there, first Black chair of the state party. And so, despite the long odds that I had, I was still able to win those races. And that's what I tell people, what's the magic of this nation that we live in. Despite how you start the race, doesn't mean that it's going to dictate how you end the race. And so we went into this race with long odds, but we have proven that even with the longest odds, going against a man who's been in Washington, D.C. for 25 years, the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, he's the world's most powerful golf caddy. But we right now are tied neck and neck, 48-48, and we have outraised him every quarter this year, and we'll probably outraise him again in this 3rd quarter. And it's because we won't give up. We are focusing on the issues that people care about here in South Carolina. And therefore, we have really gotten a lot of traction and all of the momentum in this race.
Yeah. And before we go any further, I want to give you an opportunity early on to talk about Harrison Helps and tell everyone what that's about. And tell us also, as we talked about, you would be senator, not just for Black Americans in South Carolina, but all of South Carolina. Tell us about your platform and tell us about Harrison Helps.
Yeah. So Harrison Helps is an initiative that I launched when I first started this campaign. I'm a big believer on showing and not telling. And the one thing that we find in politics sometimes is that you have politicians who always make these promises. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And part of why I don't see the turnout, particularly in African American communities, is because people have heard these broken promises time in and time again. And they're really looking for somebody who is action oriented, who's going to do something and not just talk about doing it. And so Harrison Helps is our effort to go out in the communities and actually affect change, actually impact lives right now, because people are struggling and they can't just wait until I get elected. They need some help at this moment. So we have partnered with community organizations across the state of South Carolina, from the Boys and Girls Club to Ronald McDonald House to Habitat for Humanity and a lot of local community organizations to help them address issues that people are dealing with. So from food deserts, we've helped there in terms of providing food. We provided food to first responders. We have been working on technology deserts and gaps there. So we've been trying to do all that we can. We just recently had a back to school drive where we raised $15,000, gave out over 800 backpacks for 3 communities here in South Carolina. Because I remember that time when my mom was struggling to get school supplies for me, and it was hard for her, and she wasn't able to get it all at the same time. And I wanted to make sure that I was doing something, because as school started back up, I knew that there were parents struggling just the way that my mom struggled for me. And so, that's what this race is all about. It's about going into communities, affecting change, impacting the lives of people in the best way that we possibly can. And so if I can do that now as a candidate, just think about what I'll be able to do as the next United States Senator here in South Carolina.
And for folks who want to know more about Harrison Helps, is there a website?
Yeah, just go to our website, JaimeHarrison.com, and all of the information about our Harrison Helps efforts is on the site.
And Jaime Harrison, U.S. Senate candidate out of South Carolina. Jaime, politicians as a whole are always questioned as to whether they're telling the truth or not. Well, 4.5 years ago, when Obama was in his last term and he wanted to nominate someone to the Supreme Court, and Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham in particular said absolutely not. A new president, the new president, whoever he or she might be, should elect that president. Now here we are, the unfortunate death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and Lindsey Graham is leading the call, along with the president, along with McConnell, to hurry up and push someone through. Your thoughts?
Well, growing up here in South Carolina, my grandfather taught me this. Again, he didn't have a whole lot, but he had his dignity. And he said to me, Jaime, a man is only as good as his word. A man is only as good as his word. And Lindsey Graham repeatedly, not just once, but repeatedly stated that if this scenario happened, that he would not vote to move forward a justice in an election year. Well, as we all know, people are voting right now. This is not a theoretical exercise. People are going to the polls and they are voting right now. There's a precedent has already been established by Republicans, including Lindsey Graham. And so they are, in essence, and we don't want to sugarcoat this, they are lying to the American people. Lindsey Graham is lying to the folks here in South Carolina because he said he wouldn't do it, and now he's going back on his word. And so, I think the American people, and he said, use my words against me. Well, we are going to use his words against them. He said that he wouldn't do it, and he's now doing it, betraying the trust of those folks that have sent him to Washington, D.C. to represent them and their interests.
And Jaime Harrison, how important is this seat? When you think about Obamacare, that's coming up before the court. So many other issues coming up before the court. And we're in a pandemic. I mentioned Obamacare first because we're in a pandemic and many people are struggling, not just to pay their bills, but they're struggling with healthcare and the cost of healthcare. And so during the middle of a pandemic, you have the potential of millions being stripped of their health coverage. How important is this seat now vacated, unfortunately, by the death of Justice Ginsburg?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned it. All Supreme Court Supreme Court seats are very, very important, but this one is particularly important because of what you just mentioned. As a nation, we are in the midst of this great pandemic that has rocked us to our core. We've had millions of folks that have been impacted by the coronavirus, tens of thousands that have died across this country because of the coronavirus. And right now, on November 10th, the Supreme Court is scheduled to take up the case on whether or not to rule that the Affordable Care Act, the Obamacare, whether or not that is unconstitutional. And so that would mean 24 million people, if the Supreme Court ruled that it was unconstitutional, 23 or 24 million people stripped from their health care, stripped from protections for pre-existing conditions, thousands of young people taken off the health care of their parents. That's what that would mean if they ruled against the Affordable Care Act. So this seat is extremely important. And it's important that we don't allow the politics to interfere here. Let the people of this great nation make a determination and a decision on which president should nominate and which United States Senate should take on that nomination and approve that nominee to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, and some senators, some Democratic senators and Congress people, for that matter, floated the idea over the weekend that if this nomination, Trump's nomination, goes through, now that if Biden wins the presidency and if the guys like yourself are able to win in the Senate and the Democrats take over the Senate again, that they would look to expand the court. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I've heard that from a lot of folks and from some of the pundits. And as I've said, from the start, there's a lot of if, ands, and buts. Let's focus on and be clear-eyed about the challenge that we have right in front of us. Whether or not this United States Senate is going to go against the precedent and the standards and the rules of the United States Senate and take up this nomination when so many of them said that we should never do so in this type of scenario, including Lindsey Graham. And again, we got to make them stick to their words. What are they planning to do here? And then all of the other stuff is a lot of speculation. And I just want to focus. And I think we all particularly need to get the American people focused on what was said, what was done in 2016, and what we need to do right now here in 2020.
Yeah. And I want to go to one of our viewers, David Youngblood, who watches us a lot, and we appreciate David. He asked a question that, going back to your race with Lindsey Graham, is the DSCC and you providing the necessary resources to get out every single vote? Are you putting these dollars in Black hands and Black communities? And he goes on in another post to talk about the Black press, Black radio, etc.
Well, David, it's so good to hear from you. Thank you for your question. And David, I can tell you, I have made a commitment. As you know, David, I've been doing politics now since I was 16 years old. My first campaign was Clinton Gore back in '92 when I was in high school. And I've seen good campaigns and I've seen bad campaigns. The campaigns that haven't won are those that have not invested in the African American community. And I have made sure that my first priority has been to make sure that we put significant resources in getting the vote out in that community. I am happy to say that this campaign probably is historic, because I don't think any other campaign in South Carolina can say this, at least not in my lifetime. We have made a seven-figure investment, 7 figures, not 5, not 4, not 3, 7-figure investment in terms of our outreach and commitment to Black media on this campaign. That's in newspapers, as in radio. We are reaching out in all ways that we possibly can to the African American community, because that's really, really important as it pertains for us and the base of our support. And I'm proud of that. But we're also making sure that we're going to where people are, that we're talking to them about the issues that are important to them, that resonate in their communities, and that is equally as important. And so we appreciate any support that we get from the DSCC, but that's a commitment that I've already made, that the money is already going out, because we are focused like a laser to make sure that our message gets heard to all communities, and in particular the African American community that's historically been left out of the equation.
Yeah, again, you are watching Fire, Black Press USA's live stream. We are pleased to have Jaime Harrison, who is a candidate for the U.S. Senate out of South Carolina, and he is battling. It's a David versus Goliath type battle, and he is doing extremely well. In fact, the polls show that he is tied with Lindsey Graham currently as we head into the final few weeks before the election. Jaime, what's your plans from here? You got about six weeks left. What's the strategy going forward right now?
Well, the plan is what we've been doing from day one on this campaign is to continue to talk about the issues that are impacting people on a day-to-day basis. And that's part of the reason why I'm in this race and why this race is so close. And partly it's because Lindsey Graham has forgotten the people of South Carolina. He has gone all Washington. Lindsey cares more about a TV hit time with Sean Hannity or golfing with the president than he does about the fact that 38% of rural communities in South Carolina don't have broadband, or that 4 of our rural hospitals have closed over the past few years, or that we got 700,000 plus people who have filed for unemployment. And this senator, our senator, has basically said over his dead body will he allow an extension of the federal benefit for those on the unemployment. I mean, how out of touch can you be? And that is why we are neck and neck in this race. And that's why the momentum's on our side, and we're going to win this race. Because I haven't forgotten that the role of a United States Senator is to represent the people in your state. And that's what I plan to do. Lindsey Graham only represents himself. And he's only fighting for his own political relevance and political power, instead of addressing the needs that people have in our communities across the state.
Yeah, and during the recent campaigns across the nation, increasing interest has been placed on the support candidates receive from parties outside of their home state. How important is it for campaigns to have an impact that reaches beyond the boundaries of the candidate's home state?
Yeah, well, each senator has a lot of power, and what a senator does is influence not only what goes on in their state, but what also goes on in other states as well. It's not. I know a lot of folks like to think we have walls between the states, but we don't. What I do as a United States Senator will not only impact South Carolina, but it will impact the entire nation. And we have seen the power of Lindsey Graham to impact the entire nation by passing through judges who are deemed unqualified by the American Bar Association. There's so much that we need to do. You look at Mitch McConnell and the influence that he's had over the entire nation. But he represents the Commonwealth of Kentucky. So, these races are important to our states, but also to the country as a whole.
Yeah, and when you talk about that power, we've seen, you mentioned Mitch McConnell, and even Senator Graham. We've seen that power and really in action these last 4 years, haven't we? Is it something that what you call dangerous at this point, that those individuals, particularly I guess McConnell more so than Graham, but has so much power that he could really shape everything, the courts and everything else? And I mean, they have put a record number of federal judges on the bench.
Yeah, I mean, they have tremendous power, and it's important that we always maintain checks on that power. No one individual in this country, we don't live in a monarchy. No one individual should have that much influence without having some type of check on that power within the structure of the government that we have. And Mitch McConnell has amassed an immense amount of power. But it's incumbent upon not only just Democrats, but Republicans also to see that when something is not going right, that you pull the car back into the middle of the road to make sure that we don't veer off and go into the ditch and wreck so badly that we can't get the car out. And that's the thing that I am very, very concerned with right now, that we are veering all over the road and our country has lost focus about where we're going. has lost focus about what the government actually needs to do. And it's become more about the amount of power that these individuals have amassed.
Yeah, and Jaime Harrison, it's been for most of us a year to forget. And I know you're trying to make it in November to remember. If elected, you'll come in at a time where there's a pandemic, there's millions of lives affected, millions upon millions. I mean, untold really, because we don't really know those totals, do we? But you also come in at a time where the nation has probably not been this divided as far as racial tensions and things of that nature for decades. What's the first thing that Senator Jaime Harrison will seek to accomplish when he is sworn in?
Yeah. Well, even before I get to that question, I want to underline what you said, because the nation is at a crossroads, and these elections are extremely significant, particularly here in South Carolina and in the South in general. This election cycle, we have 5 African Americans who are nominees for the United States Senate, and they're all in the South. And one of the things I've constantly saying on this race is what we are doing here is making history. We are closing the book on the old South, and we're writing a brand new book called A New South, one that is bold, that is inclusive, and that is diverse. The seat that I am vying for was the seat of John C. Calhoun. It was the seat of Strom Thurmond. It was the seat of a man called Ben Pitchfork Tillman, who would talk about the joys of lynching of Black folks on the floor of the United States Senate. And so this is really significant. South Carolina will become the very first state. It was the first state to secede from the Union in the Civil War, but it'll become the very first state to have 2 African-American senators serving at the very same time. And so when I get elected, there's going to be a tremendous amount of pressure to really right the wrongs, the historical wrongs that have been here for as long as we've been on the soil. One of the things that I just recently did was roll out what I call my Rural Hope Agenda. It's an agenda geared towards rebuilding and revitalizing rural South Carolina. Because here in South Carolina, rural just doesn't equate to white. We have many of our rural communities are majority African American. We need to make sure that when we look at the issues that drag the state down, those are issues in those communities. Health disparities, educational disparities. Our schools are crumbling in those areas. We don't have broadband. The infrastructures are horrible there. You got 40 some odd communities with lead levels higher than the federal standards. Economic opportunities are non-existent. And we need to give our farmers a new mission. And that's what my rural agenda does. It's about rebuilding and revitalizing those communities to give those people who live in those communities some sense of hope, because they've lost that sense of hope over the years. And so that's one of the first things that I want to do, along with all of the criminal justice issues that we need to tackle, because I don't think we'll get a bill done in this Congress. Student loan reform. We need to tackle climate change issues. So there's so much that I really have to roll up my sleeves on to tackle, but I'm ready to do the work.
Yeah, and I want to go back briefly to what we were discussing with the power of Senator McConnell and Lindsey Graham. Isn't the core issue not just the amount of power or authority, but where and how it is used? McConnell's power is equally felt in his complete disregard of the bills that are laying in the Senate graveyard.
Yeah, there are hundreds of bills. And one of them is a bill that is near and dear to my heart. Well, 2 of them, actually. One is the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. That bill was passed probably the beginning of this congressional session. And that bill is sitting in the Judiciary Committee with Lindsey Graham and Mitch McConnell holding it up. There's another bill that's sitting in the Judiciary Committee that is near and dear to my heart, but is being held up by Lindsey Graham and Mitch McConnell. And that is the Charleston loophole bill. As you know, 9 beautiful souls lost their lives at Mother Emanuel here in Charleston when a racist gunman went into the church, prayed with them, and then shot them down in cold blood. Well, he was able to get that gun because of a loophole in our gun laws in this country. In a bipartisan fashion, the House and the Senate closed that loophole. The House, Republicans and Democrats, came together to pass a bill to close that loophole. That bill right now is sitting in the United States Senate. It is sitting in the Judiciary Committee. And you know who the chair of the Judiciary Committee is? The senior senator from the state of South Carolina. This man lost 9 of his constituents, and their families still live here in South Carolina to this very day. And when asked whether or not he would bring the bill up for consideration, he said no. And that is the biggest travesty that I've ever witnessed in terms of representation. Nobody's asking Lindsey that he has to vote for the bill. But out of consideration, due consideration for the loved ones that were lost, his constituents, you would think he'd just bring it up for a consideration in the committee, and he won't even do that. And that's why Lindsey Graham needs to go.
And how is it, that someone like Lindsey Graham, someone like Mitch McConnell can serve term after term after term, and there's no voter repercussions?
Well, we have to demonstrate in this election, we have to demonstrate that what people say matters. Their actions matter. And Lindsey has never had an opponent like me. He has never been in a race like this. And he's nervous. He's unhinged. I am renting space in Lindsey Graham's head right now. He is thinking every move he makes, every time he says something, he's thinking about the race with me right now. And he should be, because the people in South Carolina are fed up and they're tired and they're ready for somebody that's going to work for them instead of fight against them.
Wow, Jaime Harrison is showing some Muhammad Ali in him. He's renting space in Lindsey Graham's head. Wow, I like that. So Jaime Harrison, again, we have a few moments left. We've discussed the high court and what a vote would mean, but let's discuss those federal appointments. And again, I'd love for you to express to our viewers just how significant those appointments are to the federal bench. I think this administration has appointed somewhere well over 200 judges to the bench. It's a record number.
And no African Americans.
And no African Americans. So yeah. So talk about that, if you will, the importance of those. We know how important the Supreme Court is, but there's the federal court level as well.
Well, that's extremely important. And I believe that the greatest strength that we have as a nation is our diversity. And so we need to showcase that diversity in all aspects on all levels of our government. We need to make sure that representation, because representation does matter. And it's not just tokenism, right? We're not just saying just to put somebody there because they're black or they're a woman, but because their experiences bring some heft, that brings something to bear, makes us a greater and better nation as a result. And that's what we need. And that's why it's so important to make sure you have folks with seats at the table. I mean, we've had over 2,000 senators, and in that 2,000 senators, there have only been 10 black senators. 2,000 senators, and only 10 of them have been black. Mm-hmm. And so, even though you have folks with good intentions, there's nothing that beats real life experience. That you've seen it, you've touched it, you've lived it. And you can bring that to bear to make whatever legislation, whatever appointments, a much better, stronger byproduct or end product. And so that's why it matters. That's why it's so important for folks to go out and vote, to make sure that their voices and their perspectives are represented in our government.
Well, Jaime Harrison, we've seen already how important South Carolina is. Back in February during the Democratic primaries, Joe Biden sat down with our president and CEO of the Black Press, Dr. Ben Chavis, for an interview, and he was really about to lose pretty much. The race was all but over for Biden at that time. It seems like Senator Sanders was going to take off. He sat for the interview with us, and then the next day, Jim Clyburn endorsed him, and Joe Biden has never looked back. So come November, South Carolina is probably going to be all eyes on South Carolina again.
All eyes on South Carolina. And you called this the David versus Goliath race, and we know how David versus Goliath ended. And that's how this race in South Carolina is going to end as well.
You got it. Jaime Harrison, we really appreciate you taking out the time. We will be following it. Keep us posted.
Will do. Thank you all so much.
Thank you all for watching, and everybody stay safe and stay well.